Americans' losses and
That's me.
sacrifices today.
I'm gonna. Okay, you're live now.
Okay, great. Thank you, hon.
AP correspondent Sagar Magani.
President Biden wants to avoid the mistake made when he was
I think
vice
Chappelle
president.
just jumped on, so she
Yes,
got
see
you.
Chappelle.
I tell you, I got up this morning. I was like,
We have Reverend Brooks.
just before I fall asleep.
I kept saying, tell people what we did.
Darius,
So we don't
Pastor
have time.
Brooks.
You're coming up. I am here.
Okay, well, say hello to your fan club.
He will be
the
hitting
three
the road.
amicus.
The vice president will be hitting the road.
Marty,
Good morning.
Chappelle,
Good morning.
and Maria.
Good morning, you three awesome amigas.
Let me tell you, you never should have seen. Look, if you had seen when we had this, what is it? Our last, it was our
It's
what
the
was
most
it?
serious
Maria, it was
allegation
our
yet against New
Halloween
York Governor
party.
Cuomo. The AP's
Lorraine
Yeah.
came as a
New
flapper
York
girl,
Governor Andrew
looked
Cuomo
fabulous,
is denying
and Maria came as a
allegations from an
flamenco.
aide that he groped her last week. The governor's residence. A spokesman said the
I had
entitled
fun
New
with
York
that.
governor
Look, it was
said, "I've
fabulous.
never
Red,
done
I was like,
anything
oh,
like this." Responding
well,
to an
hello,
unnamed
Maria.
woman's report,
You're like, girl, I'm
published
ready
in
for
Albany,
Halloween. And
that he
remember,
reached
Mark,
out
God
to
rest his
her
soul,
personal
Mark
phone
came in
after calling
as
her to the
a Roman
executive mansion,
centurion. We
saying
said, now
he
you
needed
know,
help
we know
with a
you've
cell
always wanted to
phone.
wear a
Hackers
dress.
say they were able to peek into hospitals and schools, among other
Oh
places,
my
after
goodness.
they
He said,
broke
no,
into the
child,
systems
you
of a
know. I
security
said,
camera
oh, I miss
startup.
Mark. I
Michelle
miss
Obama
Mark
says she's
so
thinking
much.
about retiring from public
Miss
life.
Mark.
Oh,
Miss
he
She's
was
taken up
amazing.
knitting
Wasn't
now,
he
she
wonderful?
says. She also
He was
says
just a
she had
gem.
low-grade
But
depression
let
during
me
the
say
pandemic
hello to
lockdown.
Michael
This
Ann.
is AP News.
Hey, aloha girl. You know what we're saying it for. Shirley Carter from
Idaho is dumping
Philadelphia.
Powerball.
Praise the
The
Lord,
AP's Mike
Daryl.
Garcia reports.
Francis,
Idaho
Keith Flewitt.
lawmakers are ending the Powerball
You know,
lottery
Keith, I
mistake
spoke with
because of
DeVell
concerns about foreign
Crawford
participation.
yesterday. You're going to be hearing some of
Powerball is
his music on the
expanding to
show.
include Australia
Luciana,
later this year and Britain
Raphael,
in
how you
2022.
doing?
As a
Raphael, where
result,
are you?
Idaho lottery officials were seeking
Linear,
a change in the
Bob
state
from
law
San
that only
Jose.
allows
All
lotteries that are
right,
played in the
Samantha.
U.S. and Canada.
Everybody, now
But the
do me a
legislature's House
favor.
State Affairs
Deborah,
Committee voted 10-4
just
to
very
kill
quickly,
the bill.
please
Idaho,
go
which
over
was
to
one
the
of the
Santita
first
Jackson
states to
Show
join
YouTube
Powerball in the
channel
1990s,
and
will
like
have its last Powerball
and
drawing
subscribe.
in August.
We're
I'm
trying to
Mike
build up our
Gracia.
numbers
The
there.
University of
And
California,
please hear
Davis, is offering
everybody
students
like and share,
$75
just like and
to
share,
avoid
just like and
traveling
share.
unnecessarily
Just share
during
this,
spring break
share this
because
show
of the
with somebody,
pandemic.
please, right
Students who
now.
choose to stay
Please, right
home
now.
during the
Okay,
break
so we're
will
going to
get
be
the money
talking
in
about
gift
George
cards.
Floyd getting the
Students'
latest on
response
that
has been
trial.
awesome, says the
You know, the
university
sticking point
in a
on that
statement.
trial, it seems,
Spring
is
break
how he was
begins March
killed. Now, we all
22nd.
saw him choked to
I'm Rita
death.
Foley, AP
But
News.
it seems that his defense, Derek Chauvin's defense strategy is to say that his choking, this gentleman, that didn't result in his death. We're going to talk about this oppressive voter suppression law out of Georgia. They're doing this all over the country. It's going to make it much, much harder to vote in 2022. And then we're going to look at the American Rescue Plan. Who was helped? When you're going to get your check and what it is that you need, because this is the 6th COVID rescue plan that we've had, the 6th. And doubtless we will need more. And we want to talk about what it is that we are looking for. Okay, so I'm sending everybody love. Have we let Maria and
Have a great
Marty
show.
go? Okay, I'm going to let you all go because we're up in 2 minutes. Reverend?
Have a good one.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Let me take off my earrings. Thank you, Pastor Brooks.
Okay, anytime, awesome, anytime.
All right.
Play WCPT.
So,
WCPT from
okay,
TuneIn.
so remember it's 5
Pete
minutes,
Sessions, the
and we go
Republican from
right
Texas,
to it.
had tweeted 3 days
You got to
before
get
the
this young
insurrection.
woman
Had a
on
great
your.
meeting today with folks from
You got to
Stop
get
the
her
Steal
on
at our
to
nation's
talk
capital. Oh, another one giving them tours.
to
I
your
encourage them to keep fighting, and I assured them that I look forward to doing my duty on January 6th. Well, yesterday he
congregation
deleted that tweet. Gee, I wonder why. Could it
about
be used as evidence against him in a
about
court of
what
law?
we can do to be safe.
Program. Weekdays 11 a.m.
In
to
fact,
2
I'm going to get
p.m.
this
on
nurse who
WCPT
she introduced me
820.
to, who just
Finding great
knows
candidates to
all
hire
of the
can
things
be
that you
like,
need to
well,
do
trying to find a needle in a haystack. Sure,
to try
you
to
can
be
post your
safe.
job to some job board,
Very,
but
very
then
important
all you can do is hope the right
for us
person
to
comes
know
along.
what
Which
it
is
is
why
we
You
do.
mean in
try
reference of this COVID thing?
at ZipRecruiter.com.
There are a lot of little things that we do
ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you. Its powerful
that we don't
technology
know
identifies people with the right experience and actively
really
invites them to
are
apply to
wrong.
your job. You get qualified candidates fast. So while
Say that
other
again.
companies
There are
might
a lot of
deliver
things
a
that
lot
we're
of pay,
doing that are not
ZipRecruiter
safe.
finds
And you know,
what
the
you're
fact
looking
is,
for.
she is
30.
Needle in the
I'll tell you during the break.
Job on ZipRecruiter, get a quality candidate through the site within the first day.
I'm trying to get myself trying to get up on the air
the
right
smartest
now.
way to hire. And right now, you can
All
try
right.
ZipRecruiter
Hey,
for
everybody.
free.
Thank you.
That's
Like and
right.
share, Vanderlei.
15.
Hey.
Exclusive web address.
You all have good things cooking down in Brazil. I love it.
That's
10.
ZipRecruiter.com/free. ZipRecruiter.com/free.
5 seconds.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show, Thursday, March 11th, 2021. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today on the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, WCPT 820 in Chicago, and the voice of progressive Minnesota, AM 950 radio. Going to be talking with you, everybody, about what's happening up in Minneapolis. The George Floyd trial is... the process of impaneling the jury is underway. Got to talk about that. Got to talk about this $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan. Who will be rescued? 55% of the plan goes to people. Wow. And it's the sixth such COVID rescue plan that we've had since this pandemic began. And I think we're going to have some more, but we need to first look at what is in this one. People could have checks in hand within the next 2 weeks. That would be a great thing. Going to send my brother, Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr., a happy birthday. Hey, love you so much. March 11th. Wow. My brother, everybody, Chicago, we're going to have a high of 55 degrees. It will be sunny. Minneapolis, St. Paul, a high of 48 degrees, partly cloudy. The Dow closed up. Actually, they broke a record yesterday. They went up above 32,000 points. They closed up 464 points. The NASDAQ closed down 4.9 points, and the S&P 500 closed up 23 points. Let's get to some of these headlines as we get to some of the good news today. Congress adopted the $1.9 trillion stimulus, securing the first legislative victory for President Biden. Indeed, he will be giving an address tonight to explain what's in the bill, and he and his staff are going to be hitting the road to explain what's in the bill, to see what we have access to. Everybody, Biden and his aides have promised that a large number of Americans could receive these stimulus checks, $1,400, before the end of March. New child tax support, aid to local governments, money to help families pay rent. That could take a little longer, but that is what is in the bill, everybody. There's a lot of great stuff in it. We're going to be talking about that with this wonderful panel we're going to have today. And student debt forgiveness is tax-free, limits revenue that for-profit colleges get for enrolling veterans. There's a lot of good stuff in this bill, and we're going to be talking about that and talking about how you can get your money, and even some of the hidden money in the bill. We're going to be talking about that going forward over the next few days. As we look at the George Floyd case, we're finding in this USA Today Ipsos poll that there's a stark divide on race and policing since his death. Americans' trust in the Black Lives Movement has fallen, according to this USA Today poll, and their faith in local law enforcement has risen since the protest demanding social justice swept the nation last year, according to this exclusive USA Today Ipsos poll. The debate over the intersection of racism and policing will be in the spotlight as this jury is impaneled and as this trial goes forward. What do you think is going to happen, everybody? I want you to call me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. Let me know what you think is going to happen in this trial. GWC Injury Lawyers has been generous enough to give you the opportunity to text us to that number. So please do that and meet my family over here on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. These are the Morning Stars. Everybody like and share. Meddy, Joyce, like and share. Keith Fluid, like and share. Nina Gegenheimer, go on girl, like and share. Indeed, it seems like the sticking point, according to this news report, in this trial is how George Floyd was killed. There is a debate, even though we saw him choke to death. The coroners came back with pre-existing conditions, comorbidities that he had, and they're trying to say that is what killed him, not Derek Chauvin choking him for more than 8 minutes. 4 former presidents have united for COVID vaccine ad campaigns. Presidents Barack Obama, George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, and Jimmy Carter, along with former First Ladies Michelle Obama, Laura Bush, Hillary Clinton, and Rosalind Carter, have all come together to ask people to get the vaccine. And this is in light of the fact that we're finding that community health centers vaccinated people of color at higher rates, according to the Kaiser Family Foundation. 54% of people who got their first dose of the vaccine through a community health center were people of color. That's right. And most developing countries, however, still have not been administered a single dose of any of these vaccines. The wealthy nations, including the United States, the United Kingdom, and the EU, have vaccinated their citizens at a rate of 1 person per second over the past month, while most developing countries still have not administered a single shot. Wow. What do you think about that, everybody? Call me at 773-763-WCPT. As we're watching Brazil, their deaths topped 2,000 persons in 24 hours. As we're watching the doses of these vaccines, they are hoarded by the wealthy nations too. United Kingdom, US, EU, same group. In the meantime, poor nations don't get access to the vaccine. What do you think about that? Brazil's hospital system is on the verge of collapse. These poorer nations that are rich in resources, but somehow or another they remain poor. Isn't that interesting? In the meantime, Senator Bernie Sanders is saying that we need a people's vaccine, not a profit vaccine. We're going to ask Dr. Debra Furr Holden about that, because there are patents on these vaccines that wealthy countries are holding on to that they're not sharing with poor countries, and so they're not able to develop these vaccines. Congratulations to Marcia Fudge, the former head of the Black Caucus, former president of Delta Sigma Theta. She is the new head of Housing and Urban Development. She is the secretary, the first woman of color to head that agency in more than 40 years. All right, everybody, let's get to this. Interesting, though, as we go to you, Pastor Darius Brooks of Grace Central. That's right, that Darius Brooks, the Grammy Award-winning, brilliant psalmist, record producer, singer, choir director, choir master, are finding that the trust in the military in the United States is dropping significantly, according to this new survey. Wow, can you believe that? Trust in the U.S. military has decreased significantly, according to the Ronald Reagan Institute opinion poll. About 56% of Americans surveyed said they have a great deal of trust and confidence in the military, but that number was at 70% in 2018. What's going on, everybody? Pastor Darius Brooks, Grace Central, out in Westchester, Illinois. Talk to me. We need some good news today.
Well, actually, you're on the right page of that right now. Good news. If I had to use my thought today, Santita, measure well. Measure well. Measure well. Often, the Bible says we're first natural, then spiritual. And we often respond in the natural, and it's very normal. Unfortunately, majority of the world respond there also. But when you deal with that spiritual part of you, that place is a responsive place. The natural place is a reactive place. Whenever we're operating in our natural, it's reactive. And those choices and decisions often doesn't turn out well at all. But when we respond from our spiritual place, we can see really, really, really clear. And in most cases, we have to train our thoughts to protect them. We have to train our thoughts to protect them. When you're building, you don't build on baseless thoughts. You have to measure things well. In carpentry, they say you measure 3 times and only cut once. And in every area of our lives, we have to measure. When we're in love, we have to measure. We have to measure our strength. Is this something we can do? We have to measure our weaknesses. That's I really can't handle that. We can really do anything. We really can. And the prosperity and the positive thinking are so true. What our culture, family, church, school don't teach us is proper processing. This walk is not about trial and error. It's about proper processing. And once we measure well, we really, really can make a difference, and we accomplish more than what we ever know. I often tell people, whenever you have so much to deal with, I mean, and it hits you in every area. The way you find yourself is to go to that only sacred place that you are and clean it up. Like, for instance, your room. Your room. If your world is chaos, go to that sacred space of yours and just start cleaning it up, literally. And as you're getting that therapy of cleaning it up, you're measuring that the situation in front of me will never be able to control me. And once you start measuring well and just those little places, it's domino effects from there, because measure means to look for an answer. Measure means to look for an answer. And there's an answer in everything we're doing. There's some things I can handle, I can do. But there's some things I can call my friend Santita, and she can give me an answer. There's some things I could call Reverend Jesse Jackson, and he can give me some answers. But there are answers out there, but we have to measure well to make sure that in our space and place, we begin to save ourselves there, and then be able to utilize the strength that we need as individuals, and then the strength that we create as a people. Because where there's unity, there is strength. Once I'm strong and I can do this, I got to call Santita. Once I call Santita, Santita got to call Furr. Once Santita calls Furr, then the people that we put together, we become a strength. We're not strong. You must be strong. To measure well, you must be strong as an individual first. And once you're strong there, then your help and your assistance come from others, and then that turns into strength.
Mm. Amen.
Yeah, it turns into strength. And if you don't understand to save you first and to get you first, that strength position is lost. But if you understand that in my life, mentally, physically, emotionally, financially, spiritually, socially, culturally, verbally, sexually, professionally, personally, I must measure well first to get my thoughts together to save me. And I'm saying this because it is so much good stuff out in positive thinking and good words. But Santita, if we don't take the first step to healing ourselves as an individual, shooting for all that stuff that's out there that's possible, we can skip a couple of steps and fall and mess up because we're not taught the proper process of getting there. God has everything in control. Romans 8:28 says, and for we know that all things work together for the good to them who love God, who are the called according to his purpose. Yes. Look at it like this. Yeah, in 2018, God knew today, March 11th, regardless of the pandemic, God already knew that Santita was going to be on her show at 6:18 talking to Darius Brooks on March 11th. God also knew Mark was going to pass away. God also knew, what's his name, was going to pass away. God has everything in control. And our first spiritual place is to trust him to heal us. That's measuring well. First seek ye the kingdom of God and his righteousness. This is not a scripture. The word of God are principles that we apply every day in our lives. And once we start applying these principles, that's all the word of God is. They are principles. Yes. What are you doing? Why are you doing that? Yes, that's all they are. It's not religious. It's not Catholic. It's not Baptist. It's not Kojic. It's not a priest. It's not an apostle. The word of God, that's why I believe your father is so smart. And people don't know this, but the word of God will tell you how to deal with politics. The word of God will tell you how to deal with marriages. The word of God will tell you how to deal with people. Crazy people, nice people, treat nice people. The word of God will teach you compassion. The word of God will teach you. Yeah, so all these things are in the word, but you have to measure. Well, the word of God also will teach you. Can I? Absolutely. Will I? That's on me. Can you be successful? Absolutely. Will you? That's on you. Because can we? Absolutely. The essential mystery is, will we measure well to get there? And that's my word today. Wherever you are, whoever you are, you're in a great position. Welcome to where you are, because you're in the perfect position, if you're above ground and living, to start measuring well. Yesterday don't count, but today and how you measure will set up your tomorrow very well.
Pastor Darius Brooks, Grace Central Church. You've got to get out there. It's a living, breathing gospel that he preaches, and we just thank God for all that he has done for us. Pastor Darius Brooks, your will is what's best for me. Amen to that.
That's measured well. Yes, sir.
Amen. Amen. We've got Dr. Debra Furr Holden, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University, with us today, giving us some good news and really just important news, great news, informed news about COVID-19 and about our health. How you doing, Dr. Debra Furr Holden?
Hi, I'm wonderful. Good morning, Santita. Good morning.
What is the word today?
Well, we've launched mandate equity. We are being a demand right now that people who want the vaccine are able to get the vaccine fairly and equitably. And I know a lot of people still remain on the fence, and that's their right. What I'm not okay with is if people have made the choice and are still facing barriers. Now, one somebody said to me, well, Debra, does it really matter? Because won't eventually by the end of the year, at the pace we're on, won't everybody eventually get the vaccine? So why does it really matter that we make sure everybody gets it fairly right now? As long as everybody gets it by the end of the year, isn't that okay? And I just thought, wow, this is just how our society is. When we're talking about race, we have a very large tolerance for inequity. When I was at Johns Hopkins, they had only had one Black professor in the 100-year history of the school. And I was on a crusade to change that. We were celebrating our centennial, the 100-year existence of the number one school of public health in the world. 100 years, and we had only ever had one Black full professor in that 100 years. So I went around department by department, and I said, let me insert any other demographic in that sentence, and people would be up in arms. If I said we only had one female full professor in the 100-year history of the school, they would march up to the main administration building and burn it to the ground. But we have this tolerance for racial inequity because it's something that we've lived with for so long. While it might be something that is a little hard to hear or a little hard to swallow, we surely have learned to live with it. And the thing that I want to tell people is I don't think we should continue doing that. I think us becoming desensitized and numb to racial inequity is a part of what has it continue. And we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Moderna is being sued right now. We can't predict what's going to happen. We're hoping all things stay on track and continue to go the way that they go, but there's no guarantee of that. If one of more of these vaccines gets pulled off the market, or even worse, we find that one is much better at protecting you against variants, or one is much better for providing you longer term immunity, you can imagine this issue around equity and inequity is only going to get amplified. See, the second that there wasn't enough, we started to see what we always see, which is those who can and those with power and those with privilege jockey their way to the front of the line. So we can't say with certainty how any of this is going to go. What we can do is stop the train of inequity that has already left the station, but we can stop it in its tracks. And we can do something from this point right now and forward to make sure that what happens from here out is equitable.
Well, we have
and I need people to join me in that.
Yes, because I want to know, because we're also beginning to see a push for therapeutics. Merck has had some preliminary success with one of the therapeutics for the COVID-19 disease. Will we hear about what our options are in all of this? Because we're seeing that I just reported that 54% of people of color who've gotten the vaccines have gone to community health centers. They haven't gone to their doctors. They haven't gone to these other places. What does that say? That we've gone to community health centers if we've gotten the vaccine?
Well, I think so that's not uncommon. So I'd be curious just for comparison to hear what that number looks like in other groups. Because the reality of it is that at least for the Pfizer vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine, the storage requirement meant that it couldn't go to a lot of places. It only could go to places that had, the storage capacity. And it's not just the storage capacity. You got to have these freezers. These freezers got to be on backup power so that if anything happens and you lose power, they don't lose power. So that big initial batches of vaccine that came out had to go to hospitals and academic medical centers and other places like that because they were the places that were ready to go. Now, what they would do is parse out smaller batches for the day to community sites. So most people, I believe, and I went to a community testing site, and I've shared that experience, both first dose, I went to a community testing site. It was actually a pharmacy, but they call it a community testing site. And then the second time I went to a major chain pharmacy that was in the community. But I don't think that's our big problem, because I think that's true for a lot of people. I think that's okay. I think what the real problem is that even though we placed it in community, people still have jumped the line. So we have a community testing site at a church in Flint. And the woman who was doing intake said 98% of the people who came were white. And smack dab in the middle of a Black community at a predominantly African-American church. So it's not just where people are getting it. Again, there needs to be some process of fair play. And believe the same thing's going to happen with these therapeutics.
Well, but
they
that's
basically, concocted something like a Tamiflu for COVID, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but this is what privilege is. Privilege is those who can going first, those who have the opportunity or the authority or the power or the preference to get to the front of the line, So this issue of equity is not just about vaccines, it's about everything.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to see the same kind of inequity in who has access to therapeutics, the same way we saw inequity in who had access to monoclonal antibodies, who was being prioritized to get on a ventilator.
We see this kind of inequity when people need to be treated for COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
I've got about a minute.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because people if they get it, they need to be treated for it. Are we seeing this kind of inequity? I literally have 45 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, this was something that we saw very early in the pandemic, and only, honestly, I believe, because
1 minute.
Demand for hospitalization has gone down, because we've done a better job at containing it. We have started to, protect some people who are at higher risk for bad outcome or need hospitalization, et cetera. But yeah, this is all par for the course.
Well, you know what?
And believe, if we get a surge, what we will see is that inequity come back.
Well, what I need to know from you, just in 10 seconds, how can we be part of your push
30.
For equity?
Join the fight. Go to mandateequity.org. We got an open letter to President Biden asking him to declare racial equity and COVID a national emergency. So go to mandateequity.org.
15.
So what I'm going to have you do is send this to me immediately, so Lorraine and Chapearl and Marnie can put this out, and Stanley and everybody, all the morning stars will put this out, so that we can be aboard this mandate equity train. Let's talk about George Floyd, everybody, and the GOP suppression laws on the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on 820.
Thank you so much. So what we're going to do is, because I know you have a campaign for it. If you give that to me, then we can post it every day, and then we can pass it to the morning stars, and they can pass it around too. Okay.
Okay.
Is it a petition?
It is an open letter.
An open letter, and you need people to be, because I'll be a signatory. I didn't say anything because I didn't know if it was still embargoed, so that's why I haven't said anything about it, because you wanted to. I know you were waiting for some other pieces to come and get in place. So okay.
Right.
Oh well, Nina's already put it up. All right, Nina. She already put it up. Oh yes, she did.
These my people. No, these are my people.
They are, girl.
And I want them to know this is a part of a larger movement. I think if there's goodwill, where there's goodwill, there's a legislative way. Well, a lot of the inequity and all that stuff that we see is because there's no laws attached to it. People don't do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. They do the right thing because they get their hands forced, or it's attached to something that they care about. So anyway, so I really appreciate Nina and the whole crew. I appreciate the whole daggone crew.
We see them pushing the ball up the hill. So Nina's already done that. She's put the hashtag out there, Nina Gegenheimer. Nina, so you'll be in charge of this, okay? So because we want to push this every day. So what do you need us to do with this, Debra? Do you need us? You need us to sign the letter? Exactly what are we to do?
Yeah, you sign the letter. You go on the website. It's right there. It's pretty obvious.
Okay.
It's an electronic signature. You sign it, and then like and share it with your people. See, here, let me tell you what I really want to do. So it's easy. You just go on, put in your name, any affiliation you want to list, your city and state, and you click sign the letter, and your name automatically populates. You get a tile that's just all your own. And what we really want to do is we really want the president to declare racial equity a national emergency.
Okay.
That's the real deal right there. And here's what I believe. I believe that if we can deal with racial equity, I think of racism as original sin in America. If we can deal with racism, we can deal with all the isms. There will be a lot of natural sorting and sifting of a lot of isms if we can powerfully deal with racism. Because I don't think we can tolerate any of it. I don't think it's, gender inequality, maltreatment of people based on what ableism, all of it is crazy.
All is crazy. And you know what? And it chokes the life out of you. I mean, I would say that with sexism as it impacts all women of every color, white, black, brown, yellow, red. It's all of these isms thwart
1 minute.
human growth and development. That is the sin.
Yep.
When people cannot be who God put us on earth to be. That's terrible. I've got attorneys Patillo and Hoffler on. Why don't you say hello to them? Girls, stick around so you can listen to us talk about this George Floyd case. And what they're doing.
I can't wait.
Stay right there. Stay right there because we're talking about it. All right, everybody. Thank you, Nina. So Nina, now we need you to push this every day. Okay.
30.
Nina? So you and Lorraine and Stanley work on this. But Nina, you're in charge. All right. You need to put it up there quickly. Debra, I love my people. I love y'all. Ow.
15.
Yes.
She just click. Found it. Put
10.
it up there. Love it. So Lenny,
and I really love the graphic.
5.
It's fabulous. I love the graphic. She put it
and then
out
it's
there.
Joe Biden wrapping up.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Thursday, March 11th, 2021. I'm Santita Jackson coming to you from WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. What's happening with our brothers and sisters in Minnesota? Well, as we're coming into the spring, as we're coming into the warm season, wow, it's almost been a year since we watched George Floyd shout for his mother and die as under the knee of Derek Chauvin, the police officer from the Minneapolis Police Department at the time. Of course, he was fired right after that, and several his other colleagues who were with him, they were fired too. Well, the trial is about to begin. They're impaneling the jury. So I said, look, let me stop. Let me find out what is going on because we have a lot of questions. Attorney C.K. Hoffler, president of the National Bar Association, the largest, oldest black bar association in the world, more than 65,000 lawyers. Attorney Robert Patillo, civil rights lawyer, the head of the Southeastern Regional Office of Rainbow Push. Indeed, they both have their own radio shows on WAOK. CK's radio show is every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, 8 a.m. for those of you out on the left coast, Bab and Carol. And then, of course, every Sunday from 1 to 4 Eastern Standard Time. That's 10 to 2 for you out there on the left coast. 10 to 1, out on the left coast. Bab and Carol, but you want to join them. They have magnificent shows on WAOK, the iconic black talk radio station in Atlanta. Whew. Attorney C.K. Hoffler, what are we looking at with this as we go to trial? We see that there's a stark divide on race and policing after all of the protests last year. It seems that the support for the police is still, relatively speaking, quite high. What is going on with this case? Why is the sticking point how George Floyd died? How can that be? Didn't we all see the tape?
First of all, good morning, Santita, and good morning, Robert and Dr. Debra Holden and your guests. You know, Santita, this is the difficult part of trials, particularly criminal trials. What we have to remember is that in this case, we've got to separate the criminal trial that's about to happen, where they're starting now, they're picking a jury, from the civil case. And because a lot of people tend to confuse the two and what the results would be and all of that. In the criminal trial, this is where you've got the police officer who's on trial for killing the police officers, but we're starting with the first one, the main one, on trial for killing George Floyd. So while as difficult as people can, as difficult as it may be for people to absorb this, law enforcement, I've tried cases, many cases, where the police are witnesses, and I do civil work mostly. And law enforcement get a pass. They get an automatic, they get credibility automatically when they come in the courtroom in uniform and give their reports, give their detailing, give their background, give what they did, and talk about how they operated within the standard, operated within the protocols, followed protocols. It's sort of like when you have someone who's testifying from the military. And believe it or not, jurors are very persuaded and give them a lot of deference. And so when you are at the stage now with the George Floyd case, which will go down in history as one of the most, if not the most celebrated, devastating killing in this country, because people saw him die, there's going to be a lot of support for the police because of that among jurors. That's number one. Number two, when we look at the evidence, yes, we did see, everyone did see George Floyd being killed. I mean, that's how we look at it. That's how we saw it. But when you think of a jury sitting and weighing the evidence and looking at whether the officer operated within the protocol, did he use reasonable measures to try to restrain George Floyd? To many of us, the answer is absolutely not. He's crying. He's saying, "I can't breathe." He's crying for his mother. We watch him dying. How could that be reasonable? How could that be what the protocols would dictate? But it's not as cut and dry, perhaps, as we might think. When the defense, because the prosecution will go first, but when the defense begins to lay out the protocols, the standards, what officers were required to do, and how they felt that they needed to restrain this unruly individual, to me, it should be a cut and dry case. There should be no question that there should be a conviction. But we see too many of these police brutality cases equally as disturbing as George Floyd, because there were thousands and hundreds of thousands of other George Floyd cases before that when charges were never brought because there was not the level of support globally, locally, and the protests, or if charges were brought, there was the person was acquitted, let off. The police officers were let off the hook. And so we have to remember that is the state of affairs here in the United States when it comes to these kinds of cases.
But you know,
now
that's
Mhm.
see, that's what I'm saying. The presumption by a lot of people who are not the brilliant lawyers that you and Robert Patillo are, is that it's cut and dried. Everybody saw the tape. That's it. But part of former Officer Chauvin's defense is that, well, he had pre-existing conditions. He had COVID. He had some heart disease. So that killed him. How does that work, CK?
It works because you have to take first of all, to me, it's ridiculous. So let's start with that. It's ridiculous. I too feel like this should be cut and dry. But when we get in a court of law and we're looking at all of the evidence, they are entitled to present as a defense the condition that George Floyd came in, that the officer would not have known, wouldn't have known. You know, when you stop someone, you don't have the time to say, "Look, do you have code?" All that. There was not that discussion that we know of. There's no evidence of that. So they do have the ability to say that he had all of these pre-existing conditions, and that's what ultimately led to his death. And that the intervening thing was, you know, he committed a misdemeanor or whatever he was in the midst of committing, and so he had to be detained. He was resistant, and so they exercised. He operated reasonably and using that form of a chokehold to resist his resistance. And because of his conditions, he died. I believe that's hogwash. I believe that's ridiculous. I believe that is irresponsible. I believe that's reprehensible. But I'm not a juror sitting in judgment of a police officer. And I'm also not a juror in Minnesota with the racial tension and dynamics in Minnesota and racial strife, sitting in judgment because they're judging George Floyd. They are going to judge this black man who lost his life. So all of the relevant information leading up to this and how they're going to judge him as a bad person, because there's going to be a character assassination. Some of it may not come in, may not be relevant, but some of it possibly will be relevant. I believe it's not relevant because he was killed by excessive use of force, but they're going to be entitled to present that defense. And believe it or not, you know, reasonable minds may differ on the weight of that evidence. And so that's why picking a jury is critical. You have to try to pick jurors that have an open mind to receiving the evidence. And remember, all human beings have bias. We come into life as adults as biased. Sometimes the bias is learned, and most biases are learned at home initially. But sometimes we do come into the world based on our experience. So every one of those jurors, black or white, each one is going to have a certain number of biases.
Sure.
And so when you're picking the jury, you want to make sure for either side wants to make sure that they don't have the bias in that juror that they believe could result in an acquittal or a conviction. And therein lies the struggle. And believe it or not, there have been cases like this where black jurors have acquitted white police officers where there is racial animus and the like. So it's not as cut and dry as we think. It should be as cut and dry as the world believes in the world in the world of popular opinion. But we also have to look at the political dynamics of this country. You're pulling a jury pool from regular citizens in that community, a jury, as we say, of their peers, of that police officer's peers. And even though they're going to sit in judgment of George Floyd, it is the police officer who's on trial. So in that community, a jury of his peers, some of them could think that, you know, he was reasonable. And yeah, they're sorry that George Floyd died, but he was reasonable. And as preposterous and as unbelievable as we may feel that to be, I could see that as an outcome based on historic evidence of how these cases end. Now, this is a high-profile case. Everyone's seen it. It has caused an awakening amongst people, and presumably it's caused an awakening amongst potential jurors and the jury pool. But if you come to this life or come to this table as someone who believed that it was okay for there to be the terrorism act on January 6th, and when people tried to take over the state capitol, you're more than likely not going to see that there was anything wrong with the actions of that police officer.
Sure. You know, Robert Patillo, you tell me, give me your take, because Chris called back, CK. Chris wants to talk about this, because a lot of people feel that this just might, in spite of what we saw last year on tape, that this could end in an acquittal or a mistrial. What's your take on it, Robert Patillo?
You know, well, probably the most interesting thing that has happened so far is the prosecution trying to re-add a third-degree murder charge. So if people remember back at when they initially charged the officer, initially they did charge him with third-degree murder, which is more of a reckless homicide or an accidental type of charge versus first and second-degree murder. And so that's more of a catch-all. where the prosecution will try to argue that if they're not able to prove intent, if they're not able to prove malice aforethought, if they're not able to prove the elements of the higher charges, then their goal will be to fall back on the third-degree murder charge just so that he doesn't walk. And the defense attorneys for Mr. Chauvin are opposing this, so that's what the delay of the trial is, while they try to work out whether or not they can add this additional charge. But that kind of indicates the prosecution is not certain about getting their conviction. They're not certain about being able to charge full blown ahead to get those to get that malice aforethought, to get the intent aspect pushed through. And remember, as the defense attorney for Chauvin, you don't have to prove anything. All you have to do is get one juror to have doubt, one single juror to passionately feel that there was not intent, that it was not his conscious object to take the life of George Floyd, and then the charges start falling apart thereafter. So jury selection is going to be very important when they're pulling this jury together. Also, they're going to go through a process called voir dire, or in the South, voir dire, depending on your accent, where they begin weeding out potential jurors and pulling together what the composition is going to be. And for many of those white working class, middle class, or Midwestern folks, that police officer in full uniform, full regalia, having other officers sitting in the courtroom during the trial is very persuasive, and they give them a certain benefit of the doubt that African Americans have not been able to do. They see the world through a completely different lens. So that's going to be an issue for the prosecution to jump over that hurdle. It's almost as if one of my law professors described it as having Superman and his cape with a big S on his chest on trial. It's difficult for some people to see past that. And the additional issue that I'm going to be looking at is the 404B, or prior bad acts evidence, which will come in. Whether or not they'll be able to bring in Chauvin's past disciplinary history, whether or not they'll be able to bring in any previous disciplinary records or any previous brutality events, or if they'll let other people that he's brutalized testify at trial, those sorts of things, because those are the kinds of things that would show a pattern and practice and would go towards showing intent. Also, what I want to look at is how much of George Floyd's past that the defense tries to bring in. Because what they're going to try to do is make the argument George Floyd is a bad person. He had to be subdued. So they'll try to bring in any previous drug arrest, any previous domestic violence, violent crimes that he has committed, just to dirty up the victim, to make it seem less like Chauvin was a rogue cop, but more so that he was just trying to subdue a violent criminal who has a known past and history of violent crime. And by doing so, if he can simply have one juror think in their mind, well, of course he had to hold him down like that. Look at this guy's record. And that's going to be the argument, because they don't have to prove that Chauvin didn't do anything. They just have to make one single juror think that it was in any way justified. So it's a tough road to hoe. It's an uphill battle for the prosecution. I know looking at the video, it seems as if it's going to be a slam dunk, but when it comes to police officers and the way that you can gaslight a jury, very often they can make people forget what their own lying guys are telling them.
Wow. Let me go to Chris from the South Side. Chris, what's on your mind?
Mr. Jackson, good morning.
Good morning.
I first want to thank brother and sister attorneys for their expert opinion, because they literally took what I shared with your producer, Paul, was my take as a United States Marine Corps veteran. But first, today is your brother's birthday.
That's right. I said that at the top.
Trust.
That's right.
I want you to know that there is a Black business owner who has a present for your brother. Cream with a K, Creations with a K, 312-315-8440. It's a specialty t-shirt that involves you, your siblings,
sweetheart, that is so sweet. Thank you. It is my brother's birthday today, but yes, please. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. Again, I was that 14-year-old, the farmer.
Yes.
And see,
up in Iowa.
We're not married.
That's right.
Absolutely.
That's right.
So, Pastor Brooks, again, his music at 50th and Drexel, will never forget it. Thankful for his inspiration this morning.
Yes.
So, the 4 words that are important, Miss Jackson, are simple. Does this George matter? Once upon a time in Florida, there was a boy who went out for some Skittles. That George mattered. And that little boy lost. So in Minnesota, we have to ask ourselves, because we've seen it before, have we not? The most striking was 29 years ago. There was a videotape, and those 4 officers in Los Angeles skipped free. So, 29 years later, does this George matter? At the end of the day, as I close, some of us are already preparing for the inevitable, because why be surprised? Why get up hope? At the end of the day, when you've seen it before, and history will repeat itself, it's as if the last attorney who just spoke, all I have to do is find one. And when that one presents his secret sign that he is a white supremacist, you might want to prepare for a long, hot, burning summer in Minnesota. That's my comment.
Chris from the South Side, and thank you for the birthday love for my brother. Thank you so much. Let me go to Daniel from New Hampshire. Daniel?
Good morning. It's me again. I'm calling. How you doing?
Wonderful.
The lady who was speaking, who was talking about the Derek Chauvin's defense.
Mm-hmm.
The way I look at that is, okay, so George Floyd maybe had some heart conditions. Maybe, I honestly don't know what he had. I don't know if there was actually drugs in the system. I heard there was something about he wrote a fake check or passed a fake bill.
Well, he had made a purchase and he received change.
Yes,
and he made another purchase at another store. And the $20 bill that just to clarify, the $20 bill that he used in the to purchase these products, they said was counterfeit. And no one has asked where he got. He had a $100 bill that he had used in a purchase just shortly beforehand, and part of the money that he got back was counterfeit. At least one of the bills was. So
that was going to be part of my point. Is regardless of how this plan pans out, and I'm sorry for the noise. I'm in a truck.
Oh. Okay.
The punishment didn't fit the crime, regardless. But she was saying that they're going to make the case that he had a condition that the cop wouldn't have known about. Was he having that condition before a knee was placed on his neck? No. So the argument that he had a condition or, he had COVID or whatever, that wasn't affecting him prior to being strangled by somebody else's knee.
So you believe?
So, in my opinion,
okay, because I want to know. Do you believe that he was killed because he was strangled because he was choked to death by the police officer, or not?
100%.
Okay.
If he didn't have a knee on his neck for 8 minutes, he would still be here. And maybe he could have stood trial and given his case about where that counterfeit bill came from. But a rogue killer cop took away that possibility. And not only that, he was videotaped staring into the camera, making sure you get his good side, putting his hands in his pockets as if he didn't care what happened. So next up, you have to ask yourself, and maybe we need Matthew McConaughey and Sandra Bullock to step in. If he was white, what would the discussion be? It'd be open and shut.
You tell me. What would it be?
Because it should be open and shut.
Well, let me go to you very quickly, CK. You and Robert, I have about a minute apiece for you. CK, open and
Well,
shut.
I mean, of course it would be an open and shut case, and of course it should be an open and shut case, but of course it will not be an open and shut case. And therein lies the problem. 8 minutes and 46 seconds of any grown man's knee on anyone's neck would likely result in that person dying like George Floyd. They've got to have medical experts that will say that. But this happened in part because of his race, in terms of the severity of the use of force selected by this police, and the result in trial is going to happen in part because of that. That's why I start off by distinguishing that there's a criminal case and a civil case. Because in a civil case, there are different things that you present as evidence. There are different standards that are used. It's civil liability. And I do believe in a civil case that they would hold the police officers liable if the civil case does get to trial, without a question, and the damages would be significant. But for a criminal case, where this police officer would be facing jail time, and the fact that the prosecutors are arguing over bringing in a third degree, a lesser crime, because I'm sure they are concerned with just what we're talking about, that a jury may not wish to convict on first or second degree, but third degree, which is so reckless, maybe it was wrong, even though he thought he had some justification, it was more reckless and not intentional, it was more accidental and not intentional, more all this, just in case. And I believe that because of the history with these cases, you rarely get convictions with Black victims. I believe if this were a white victim, of course, it's a difficult case against law enforcement. Sure. But if it were a white victim, I think the police officer may have taken a plea. We may not have even gotten to this, because I think that there would have been a prevailing view that he's going to go down. He's going to be convicted. That's my sense.
No, that's a whole lot. Robert, I got about 30 seconds, and you got them.
Look out for what
1 minute.
Professors call the buck defense. The buck defense. And that is when they try to turn a Black man into this big buck Negro for the jury. So they'll start saying, well, he was 6'5", 280 pounds, former athlete, fast, strong, agile, a Superman of sorts. He lifted up a car, jumped over a building, and of course I had to put my knee on his neck to subdue him and hold him down. And that is often very persuasive to white juries. And so the minute you start hearing them mentioning his height, his weight, his strength, just know that they are moving into the buck defense.
15.
And be very careful that they are trying to subtly and silently
10.
hard to make it seem as if this officer had no ability to protect himself against not a
5.
human, not a regular man who has a family, but against this large, menacing creature that he had no choice but to use excessive force on.
A creature, not a human being. More of the Santita Jackson Show. What's in that American Rescue Plan? When are you going to get your money? Back in just a minute. Wow, you guys. The buck defense. Oh, wow. I can see it now, Robert. CK, I see it,
right, and
remember they were both bouncers at the same club. Remember that? So you never know how
he knew his wife.
Yeah, so you never know how resentful Chauvin was of this guy who knew all the basketball players. He played basketball. Remember, he had this exotic tape, so he's a master lover. Oh, really, because all this stuff. I'm just trying to figure out how it is that we're figuring this out now, CK. Debra, are you still there, Dr. Debra Furr Holden? The fact that this is not open and shut is like, what?
It's amazing. But Santita, let's remember now, yesterday you had a spirited discussion about bias, about how people feel about just dating. But you all come to the table with those biases, with those feelings. Doesn't mean you're going to act on someone and for there to be racial animus, but we all come to the table. So just imagine a juror, maybe a white male juror, looking at these, or they already know this because it's been in the public domain, all of these stories and, with him, with white women, that because there is some evidence, as I understand it, of that. How is it relevant? Not at all. But imagine if you have
he's in
someone who
Minneapolis.
comes,
Hello.
Right. But what I'm saying is, I'm just playing out how it is. All of these things become important when you're picking a jury, and when there's, because George Floyd's going to be on trial. Yes, the officer's going to be on trial, but it's George Floyd who's going to be on trial more ironically, in terms of his character, like I said before, and all the things that Robert said. So imagine someone coming to the table with this bias. It's just how you feel about this.
But CK,
and
that's why. To interrupt, because I know we have to move on to the American Rescue Plan. That's why I want you all to come on and kind of massage this into the audience, because people need to understand how this can go way away from the way we think it's going to go. We watched a snuff film last year, and white, black, brown, yellow, red, right-wing Republican, far to the left, off the reservation Democrat, everybody's mind was blown by this. I saw people on YouTube and on Facebook who said, look, I never would have believed this would have happened. White people. They said, this is the most horrible thing I've ever seen in my life. But what you and Robert are bringing to us is, oh no, this can go seriously left. You think that this is going to go, this is not what you think it is. And see, we're not lawyers.
Right. Well, I will tell you a group of people who would not be surprised if he's acquitted. And those are the citizens, the black citizens, the police, but the black citizens of Minnesota. They're not going to be surprised. They're bracing themselves. They're community leaders now working with and preparing the people for an acquittal so that there is not a war. This is going to be nationally, locally, and internationally. If there is an acquittal, it's going to change the way that the world sees police brutality yet again. It's going to change the narrative because, like you said, so many people feel this is, which it is, horrific, atrocious, awful, disgusting, degrading, unbelievable, incredible. How could it be? And yet, there are many examples of this in the past. So with people feeling that way, even people who are sort of right-wing political people feeling that way, if there is an acquittal, it's going to change the way that people look at our system, our criminal justice system. And internationally, it's going to change the way that we are perceived here in the United States in terms of justice. It will not change the way that Black folks look at this because we have lived this our entire lives. But it will change the way, just as this murder changed the way that people looked at how Black folks are treated in terms of police and law enforcement. It did awaken a lot of people. So if there's an acquittal, it's going to start a whole new discussion and dialogue and hopefully action. I pray that there's a conviction, but there's so few cases like this that result in conviction. By the way, there's so few cases like this that result in indictments. There's so few cases like this that even get to trial because I once did a panel with some of the top Black women prosecutors in this country, all of them, and in fact, it was sponsored by Rainbow Push Coalition. All of them are catching a lot of hell, if you will, by the people nationally when they are bringing charges against law enforcement. Catch hell. People trying to get rid of them, take them out, death threats and the like. All of them. When they are simply trying to hold accountable law enforcement for severe excessive use of force cases, not cases.
1 minute.
Prosecutors, they want cases that they feel they can win.
CK?
And all of them, because of those actions, are catching him.
I'm gonna have to let you and Robert go, but I'm telling you, Carol said it best. CK is preparing us. Okay. And Dwight McKee and attorney Mark Fancher say hello to attorneys CK Hoffler and Robert Patillo. They're going to be leaving us, but wow. It's
30.
Good morning. Good morning.
Doing well. How are you? Party.
Okay,
Some of your best guests are leaving.
Oh, I hate to say goodbye to you guys because it's like so much great stuff. Oh my gosh.
Well, Santita,
15.
thank you for all that you do. And I think we should keep this discussion going because, this is, your words and the words of your guests, I think hopefully will get out to the public because
5.
I wish that I had a different message. I certainly do.
No, I want you back on tomorrow because you have to prep us for this.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Thursday, March 11th, 2021. I'm coming to you from WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. We just had attorneys CK Hoffler and Robert Patillo on with us, and we were talking right up until we got up here. Because they'll be back on tomorrow. I'm already claiming them because we have to be prepared for what we think might not happen in the George Floyd case. Because he is on trial, everybody. He is on trial. So for all my brothers and sisters to the north at AM 950 radio, we're watching. We're with you. We're also clear that this trial is as much, if not more, about George Floyd and his life and his struggles and his challenges than it is about Derek Chauvin, the man whose knee was on his neck for more than 8 minutes, who choked him to death. So we got to talk about this American Rescue Plan, what is in it and what should be in it. And what's next? It's the 6th plan. It's the 6th COVID rescue package that has come from our government in a year. Okay, everybody, Chicago, we're going to have a high of 55 degrees. It will be sunny. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 48 degrees, partly cloudy. The Dow closed up 464 points yesterday. Indeed, they went above 32,000, breaking a record. The NASDAQ was down 4.9 points, and the S&P 500 was up 23 points. Let's get some of these headlines in, Paul. The U.S. is preparing to send out $1,400 checks, everybody. Congress approved a sweeping $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief package on Wednesday, authorizing a flurry of federal spending and temporary yet dramatic increase in anti-poverty programs. Indeed, 54% of these monies will go to the American people. Enhanced unemployment payments of $300, $1,400 for most Americans. Now, mind you, 17 million fewer Americans will be receiving this relief because the path to relief was narrowed. But there's still a lot of good stuff in this, and so we're going to be talking about this in just a few minutes. What indeed was in this and what should be in it, and are we going to have a 7th COVID relief package? Many people say that we should. Indeed, Senator Bernie Sanders says, we need $2,000 a month, period, all the way across the board until we get out of this. There's a stark divide on race and policing since George Floyd's death, according to a USA Today Ipsos poll. The debate over the intersection of racism and policing will be in the spotlight as the jury in the Derek Chauvin case, the man accused of killing George Floyd, as they are impaneled. Last June, 60% in USA Today Ipsos poll described Floyd's death as murder. That percentage has now dropped by double digits to 36%. Wow. Uncertainty has grown about how to characterize the incident, caught on video when Chauvin held his knee on Floyd's neck and ignored his protest that he couldn't breathe. Last year, 4% said they didn't know how to describe it. That number has climbed to 17%, everybody. Beware, beware, beware. Marcia Fudge, former president of Delta Sigma Theta and former head of the Congressional Black Caucus, former congresswoman out of Cleveland. She is now the head of HUD. So congratulations to her, most of these cabinet positions have been filled, so what's going to happen? She's got big plans. She wants to be head of the Department of Agriculture, but I know she's going to do great things at HUD. Congratulations to Soror Fudge. Brazil's Lula. That's right. Luis Inácio Lula da Silva will be facing off, it does seem, against President Jair Bolsonaro. We do hope so. Indeed, he's the most populist politician down in Brazil. Former union leader, someone who has the support, overwhelming support of the black community there and progressives. We will see. He has fired a warning shot on President Bolsonaro, saying that the country is disorganized and falling apart because it has no government. And he's running under a banner of health, jobs, and justice for Brazil as we're watching the death rate to COVID-19 surge past 2,000 persons in one day in Brazil. They're having a very, very hard time there. In addition to this fact, now here in the United States, you have four former presidents. Presidents Carter, George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, and Barack Obama, who are, along with their wives, Michelle Obama, Laura Bush, Hillary Clinton, and Rosalind Carter, they are now uniting for a COVID ad imploring Americans to get their COVID vaccines. And Bernie Sanders, always on the case, he said we need a people's vaccine, not a profit vaccine. Indeed, the wealthiest countries have been hoarding the vaccines, led by the United States, the UK, and the EU. They bought most of the vaccines, and they're not sharing the patents. So poor countries are not able to replicate these vaccines without significant cost. What do you think about that, everybody? Something to think about. In the meantime, LeBron James is under tremendous pressure to confirm whether or not publicly he will take the vaccine. He has said, that's a conversation that my family and I will have, pretty much kept that to a private thing, but he's being pressured to go public with his decision. So what do you think about that, everybody? Trust in the military, in the meantime, has dropped significantly, according to the Ronald Reagan Institute. About 56% of Americans surveyed said that they had a great deal of trust and confidence in the military, but that's down from 70% just 3 years ago in 2018. Oh boy, this $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan, we've never seen anything quite like it in the history of our country. But this is a big plan that's addressing big problems because we are looking at Depression era level problems in the United States. So let's talk about this. What should be in this? What should be in this bill? I'm going to be talking with Dr. Max Wolf at the bottom of the hour about what is in it, but what should be in it? Should we be tackling poverty? I mean, who is going to get helped? Who should be helped? All of these plans, the PPP plan and all of that, well, they ended up helping corporations, and it seems that people got left behind. So let's talk with Attorney Mark Fancher from the National Conference of Black Lawyers and noted sociologist from the National Action Network and Operation Push and Rainbow Push, Dwight McKee. What's in this plan? The Democrats are shifting their messaging from resolving an economic crisis to attacking poverty. What do you think about that? Call me, everybody, at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. And do you think you're going to get your money? Now, 17 million fewer of you are going to get some money because it was going to be $100,000. And everybody who made $100,000 or less, you were going to get some relief. No, now that's down to $75,000. Married couples, it was going to be $200,000 or less, you were going to get some relief. That's now down to $150,000. $150,000 for a married couple in New York City and even in Chicago is not a whole lot of money. Attorney Mark Fancher, what should we be looking for in this plan? The president is going to speak tonight.
Well, I don't know what we should look for or what we can actually expect from it, but I know what we should ideally be looking for, and that's for government to do what it should be doing on an ongoing basis.
I think that the entire crisis, which has triggered the need for such a massive, sudden effort to try and save the country, health-wise, economically, and otherwise, is yet further evidence of the failures of a system that doesn't, on an ongoing basis, address the needs of its people. We have people in trouble because of the economic insecurity that's created by multinational corporations and others that can throw entire communities into economic chaos because of decisions that they make about the location or relocation of facilities. We're in this crisis because on an ongoing basis, people don't have access to the type of health care that would allow them to have dealt with this type of problem in a responsible way and in an ongoing way. We have this problem just because of ongoing contradictions between what the system is supposed to deliver to the people and what it actually does deliver, which is not what the people need. So we have these emergency kinds of measures that we're forced to deal with right now. And, by estimates provided by various people, they're going to be inadequate. I'm not sniffing at the payments that people are going to receive, because for somebody who has nothing, this is a big deal to be able to get, $1,400 or whatever else they're entitled to get. But they shouldn't have to rely upon emergency payments like this.
And a debate, right?
Yeah.
Because 17 million fewer people are going to get this money. 17 million. I mean, $100,000 a year might sound like a lot to a lot of people, particularly when you have nothing. But in Washington, D.C., which is a very costly place, and when you have student loans, when you just have debt, right, which is what most folk have, that's not a lot of money. It's not a lot of money. But these corporations seem to get carte blanche. Dwight McKee, what should be in this package?
Well, the reason that Roosevelt put together a new deal is because the old deal was not working. And so because of the Depression, because of the holes in the stock market, because of corporate and personal greed, the economy of the country collapsed and capitalism was at risk. And so his job was, and he did an effective job, was to save capitalism. What happened in 2006, 2007, during this last depression, was a little different in that it was personal greed, and they really did a shakedown of the economy rather than shake up of the economy. And so what the president, what Paulson and Obama and Bush did was to save capitalists. There's a difference between saving capitalism as a system and saving capitalists who are the greedy and the folk who ran shipside over the economy and stole the money out of the economy. What we have to have now is a reset. That is that we have to look at how this economy is set up, who it benefits, and the inequities in it, and how to make the system work for more and more people rather than less and less people. The reason, Mark, that they took the people out of this deal and reduced the deal is because they didn't want to inflate the economy. What that means is that if they would have given more people money to be able to survive, it would have devalued money. And the role of the Federal Reserve is to protect the value of the money so that the rich people who have money, the valuations represent a certain level of wealth. And the more people that have money, because capitalism is based on the laws of supply and demand, the more people who have money and the more democratic money is spread, it reduces the value of money for the very rich, but it does bring the very poor up to a level, and so they end up sacrificing the poor again in behalf of the rich. And in a country that has where the infrastructure is falling down, where there are almost no jobs, where the most of the major jobs have either gone overseas or being threatened by automation, we have to look at how our economy works in relationship to this modern world and do a reset based on that. That's why I talk about the difference between remedy and relief. They're looking at relief. They're looking at how you just can keep breathing long enough to stay alive, rather than looking at remedy, where you correct the system, where you get a lung transplant and change the quality of your life.
Let me go to Shay from Minneapolis. Shay, what's on your mind, Shay?
Hi, I'm in general vexed. I like the conversation, but I think we should all have tattooed on our foreheads the saying, change never comes from the top. It always comes from the grassroots bottom. Because I'm feeling like we are sitting on our thumbs, not doing anything. We need the filibuster overturned. We're blocked by the senators in West Virginia and Arizona so that we can get legislation passed that will allow us to do away with the gerrymandering and the voter suppression. It's new laws being enacted as we speak all over this country. And I'm like, why are we not doing what we did in Georgia in 2020, launching letter writing and phone banking, postcard campaigns into West Virginia and Arizona, urging people to contact their senators and say, quit with the blocking of this stuff. But I feel like we're kind of sitting on our thumbs waiting for somebody to come and save us. I wrote to Vote Forward and Flip the West and with the launch campaigns in 2020, and I get no response. And Flip the West is worried about a seat in Texas, a House seat in Texas they want to flip. Like, if we do away with a filibuster, we will get Democratic representation that allow us to admit D.C. and enfranchise millions of people and get us 2 senators. And why are they worrying about a seat in Texas? Anyway, so I wish I could leave my email or something, but I just get terribly inundated with hate mail probably. Anybody who has the skills, I mean, I'm to the point where like, well, then I'll do it myself. Just could somebody help show me how, you know?
You know, what hold stay right there, Miss Shay. Dwight, you've done organizing for more than 50 years. What would you recommend that Miss Shay do?
Well, I'm not at the recommend stage. I'm at the, you know, if I'm not doing it, nobody else is either.
But
so I better get busy.
But but that's what it is.
So
well, no, ma'am.
Yeah, what I'm thinking is.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, what I'm thinking is that I need to talk to people. I think I'm going to try talking to the Minnesota DFL, see if they've got contacts in West Virginia and Arizona DFL. I'm going to talk to ACLU. I'm going to start talking to people and saying, we got to do something. We can't sit here on our thumbs and let this opportunity slide away while our country slides into fascism.
Well, you know, now, Dwight, this is an opportunity to organize, Dwight and Mark.
Yeah, but the issue is the Democrats are hiding behind the filibuster. They're using it as a pretext not to deal with the issue because they have a vested value and a vested interest in the status quo in the economy. They were willing to take $1 trillion out of the economy through tax cuts, but they're not willing to put $2 trillion in the economy to revive the economy. and they don't need the filibuster. Is they can get past that tomorrow if that was in their will. They're not trying to get past filibuster because they need it as a pretext for them not to deal with the issue, because in terms of values, they are right on the same side as Republicans in this thing. They have as much money involved as Republicans do in many ways. Kerry is married to Hines, and Kerry got as much money as Trump does. He's married to Hines. Pelosi got as much money as Romney does. They all are working for the corporations and the rich.
Mark Fancher, I think he said a lot.
He did, and I think what he said earlier is just so important. He explained the ways in which the system is really on autopilot in many ways to protect the value of the money that's held by the rich, and to ensure that those who are poor don't have what they need. I mean, that's just sick. I mean, and I think it's a fundamental flaw in the system itself. And while we can talk about and think about the kinds of reforms that we can try and bring about to the system, and the organizing techniques that we might use to try and bring them about, ultimately we come back to the question of whether we need to get rid of this entire system because of just its inherent moral bankruptcy. And I think that's where the energy and the thought and the focus needs to be, at the same time that people are trying to cope with the urgent and immediate problems that we have.
But don't you think the energy is going to go that way because the pain is that deep? Reverend Jackson has said that, we need radical solutions because we've got radical problems.
Well, I would hope so, except that we've been down this road so many times. I think that the contradictions of the system have made themselves apparent on so many occasions in so many ways. But I think that, as a society, we've been, extremely well trained to sing the virtues of capitalism and to think that that's the only sensible, decent, and humane way to run an economy, which is exactly backwards. It is the most morally bankrupt, most corrupt way to run an economy. It does not address the people's needs. And, we just haven't been able to overcome a lot of the holdover
1 minute
about socialism from the Cold War and from an incessant, flow of propaganda about the system and what it means.
Hey, everybody. Are you expecting a check? Were you expecting a check? 17 million fewer Americans are going to get a check. But a lot of Americans are going to get something. They're going to get something. Is it enough? Do you know what you're going to get? Do you know what you're entitled to? What are you expecting? I want you to call me or text me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9270. I see you, Sharissa, from Minnesota. All my Minnesota people coming on through. Love it, love it, love it. And everybody over on the Santita Jackson and Friends page, please go to my YouTube page, the Santita Jackson Show, and like and subscribe. You can come back over here and be with the Morning Stars on Facebook, Santita Jackson and Friends, but I want you to talk to me. We're going to talk with Dr. Max Wolf about this American Rescue Plan. What is in it? Back in just a minute. Thank you, Dwight and Mark. You all are the best. Oh my gosh. I just like.
Well, you might be just talking about yourself.
No, not at all. No, not at all. No. I think you're the best. I really, really do. And I thank God for you. And and the people here love you. They do. Because you really do bring you speak to where we really are. A lot of people, when I see the pundits, and God bless them, they have their job to do, but they're just not doing a job that helps us. They're not talking about what's in these plans and how they're going to help. They're busy trying to, hold up one party or the other. And it's people are hurting out here. You know, I told
No,
you
they seriously are.
Yeah, you can't even idle in your car now. People are carjacking like crazy. And going to an ATM, forget about that. Mm-mm. No. It's bad. And it's bad when you're on the ground. If you're protected and you're kind of away from everything, then you can look at this in a very academic way. Well, I'm not. And that is, it's just, this is a lot.
So Mark is the best. I appreciate his perspective every time.
Every time.
Oh, no, stop. Y'all stop, because I do this so I can learn from y'all.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Stay right here. I've got Dr. Max Wolf on. You know, he comes on with us every Thursday at 7:30. Dr. Wolf.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Good morning. We've been talking about the American Rescue Plan and what's in it, what's not in it, what should be in it, because we're trying to figure it all out. We are trying to figure it all out. We've got brilliant sociologist and political organizer for more than 50 years. I've known him all of my life and before. That is Dwight McKee. He's one of the founding members of Operation Push. In fact, he and Allie Walker were our two youngest board members. Were you 18? Maybe you were at the most. Were you 18 or 19? Maybe. But you know, you joined Barry Gordy and Quincy Jones and John and George Johnson and giants like that, Jackie Robinson. But we have had so much esteem for him then and have that much esteem for him now. And then, of course, we've got Attorney Mark Fancher, National Conference of Black Lawyers. They've been talking about what should be in the plan and how the system needs to be restructured, because it's just not working for people, Dr. Wolf. But I can't wait to hear what you have in store for us today. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me. I'm obviously humbled by being amongst such esteemed and knowledgeable guests, and possibly all would be better off, including myself, if I listened more and talked less.
1 minute.
I'll break the common sense rule just so I'm not the world's worst radio guest, because listening live on the air is probably not that exciting for your audience.
We love you. You look, gotta love Max. I love this guy. You have no idea.
Join me at 7:30 a.m., where various people listen to other people on my show. That's probably not a good pitch.
Well, you know what? I think you need to get people who are smarter than you, right? And who understand.
Easy for me.
30.
For some people, that's tricky, but I just go outside here in Brooklyn and bang.
No. You know, I gotta watch this. You all gotta watch this guy. You all are three of the smartest human beings I know, and I'm so glad that you're
15.
here. Stand by. Stand by. Stand by. The American Rescue Plan. Wow.
5.
Oh, I hope this works out.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. March 11th, 2021. WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Got all my Minnesota people checking in today. And of course, this is my brother Jesse's birthday. Former Congressman Jackson. That's right. Happy birthday to my beloved brother, my brother beloved. Love him so much. Love him so much. God bless you, Jesse, today. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. And everybody, please try and send him some birthday greetings. Everybody loves that. Love it, love it, love it. 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. I am Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you. GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to text that number with your comments. I want to hear from you. What is in this plan? What do you want to have in this plan? And will this plan, is it enough to help you? $1,400, 17 million fewer people will get access to this relief. But some adult dependents are going to get access to this relief. So we brought on Dr. Max Wolf, who is brilliant, and you know he's here every Thursday at 7:30, breaking everything down for us, whether it's economic, religious, social, or political. He's got some brilliant thoughts. Dr. Wolf, the American Rescue Plan, what is it?
Yeah, so look, it's obviously a day late, as the old metaphor goes, and for many folks it may be a few dollars short. I think, to be fair to the plan and the serious efforts made to get even this through, a lot of people worked really hard and put the greater good above what they wanted and what they were working on in an effort to get at least all the Democrats to vote for it. And if you look through it, they got almost all the Democratic Party folks to vote for it in the Congress. And obviously the Republican turnout was zero, basically, here. So even though there's some praise for some parts of the bill, so there's going to be a lot of Republicans who are going to be running for re-election because of this bill, even though they vote against it, right? So be fair from a tactical perspective, there's a lot of resistance to stuff like this, even now. Some of it just because there's just a partisanship of Dems oppose everything Republicans do, even if it's a good idea sometimes, and Republicans oppose anything that Dems do, even if it's a good idea sometimes. That's the sort of partisanship. But there's also we're at an inflection moment for the country, right? About what are we going to do about inclusion? What are we going to do about race? What are we going to do about unemployment? What are we going to do about opportunity? And as much as it'd be nice to say we're all of one mind, we very clearly are not. And in my humble opinion, a fairly large number of us have now lost their minds. So there's people who oppose you, there's people who support you, and in both camps are people who have floated off their earthly plane intellectually. And so that seems to be a popular choice, like door number 3, go nuts. And so there's just a lot to handle for anyone. And I think this plan does some things that are quite good that will make a meaningful kitchen table difference for some folks. But I think it leaves a lot of essential work undone.
You know, I want you to respond to Carissa Jones as you tell us what is in it, what's good, and what is undone. She said a compromise, she's out of Minneapolis. A compromise is a limited victory for the unemployed. The one-time allotment of $1,400 will help some for about a month, and that is a maybe. I will not benefit, she says. I make less than $100,000, but I have a lot of student loan debt. It would help if they at least got rid of the interest accumulated from student loans. There are so many more things that I need to be fixed. I am a public employee. Wow.
I would say there is an unemployment benefit increase and extension through September, so it's only $300 a week. But if she is receiving unemployment benefits, there is actually a meaningful extension of the duration of the federal portion of those. How that affects you does vary by state because different states have quite different rules on such things, but there is a increase of benefits to $300 and an extension through September. So that could have a meaningful positive impact for a lot of people, possibly including her. There is some sort of initial, very minor student loan relief discussion in here, but it's not major. And the $1,400 just is kind of what it is. There's some foreclosure and eviction relief. And the other thing, especially because the caller there mentions that she's a municipal employee, is there is, for the first time, and I think this is a big deal, a lot of money going to state and local governments, which is really important to prevent them from doing things like slashing their benefits and firing their employees. I don't know whether or not that has any immediate bearing on this individual, but it could, and it's certainly positive for many. And I'll add one thing about the $1,400. This will make me unpopular. It always does. Giving people checks sounds good, and everyone likes getting a check, myself included. I'm happy to give everyone here my PO box if they want to sort of test if I'm a hypocrite or not, like let the checks run. But it's a terrible way to do this because it's very blunt instrument. It's just popular, right? It's liquor right before it's that last drink before they tell you it's closing time in the bar. Seems like a good idea. Probably not, So giving money to state and local governments to do programs for people is more effective. For a lot of reasons, the money is slowest and hardest to get to for a lot of low-income people who don't do direct deposits and who have other issues, even sometimes with the prepaid cards. So it sounds good, but student loan relief, job retraining, making public housing safe and dignified as a good place to live, investing in public schools, which have been devastated for a lot of reasons by COVID and the recession to come, and increasing public health care. Those are not glamorous. They don't get people excited like checks, but they're way more socially valuable. So there is some value, even if it is kind of not a huge amount of money, to some direct cash flow to public transit and public infrastructure bill, which is supposed to come next, but got a little bit of money here. So this bill at least doesn't have the savage problem in terms of having almost no defensible social priority that previous bills around COVID relief have had. So I think credit where it's due, as well as demerit where it's due.
They said that this is, before I go to the callers, that this can really, that this goes beyond economic relief, that this is really now and a step away from Reaganism. It's a move toward the eradication of poverty. Is that what you see?
I think that might be a little bold, but if I was trying to sell something, I might push its positive attributes too. I would say that this makes a direct targeted attempt to reduce the overall U.S. poverty rate by a third, and youth poverty, which is a sort of pandemic worse than COVID in many ways that doesn't get much attention in the United States, by 50%. That does harken back to a kinder era where we had a more inclusive idea of how to lift up our society, where we didn't think that the majority of people were just useful to be stepped on to move the wealthy and the privileged higher up faster. So I do think there's some of that ethos in there. I think we probably have a ways to go before we're all the way back, but it's an important step symbolically, and it does suggest a bit of, at least for some folks, a sort of more humane shift in the national policy, which I don't think I would want to, dismiss or flippantly reject.
Chaparral, how you doing? What's on your mind today?
Yes, Santita. Good morning, Dr. Wolf. I wanted to ask for clarification on this child tax credit, because I'm getting mixed signals, and it depends on where you're looking. Some people say it's going to be like an offset credit that when you file your taxes, you're going to get it. But then other people are saying that you're going to get monthly checks from the government ongoing.
Well, so
which is true?
So children are eligible for the stimulus, obviously constrained by some of the same issues around household income. But so your child, even somebody born in 2020, could be eligible for the one-time stimulus. And there is an increase in the child tax credit and a broadening of the understanding of that, including dependent credits for children that may be older than the previous definition of a child. So I think there's a couple of different programs that could potentially cash flow to somebody in a lot of circumstances, and that's why an answer is elusive. You know what I mean? Because it depends a little bit on your exact situation. And then some of these benefits are a larger total gain to some people than others, just because different states are really vastly different in their generosity in terms of the size of payments that they'll make at the state level and the duration of time that they'll make those payments. So it's hard to give a good blanket answer to people.
Chaparral?
Okay, so that's why we're getting those conflicting information. Because I was listening to Rachel Maddow last night, and she said, the kids are going to get the $1,400. That's even for adult dependent children. And then she said, but you're going to get an ongoing money every month, like they're going to be depositing every month. So that's why I was trying to clarify that.
No.
Or if you're going to have to wait when you file your taxes and you take the child tax credit for the year, Because they were saying that this child tax credit basically is eliminating child poverty or something, the way that they structured the plan.
Yeah, so be careful too, right? When economic policy people or economists use terms like eliminate child poverty, they probably mean something very different than regular citizens do, which means that if I include the benefit back into the average income of the average poor person, their total income, including the benefits, rises above the federal poverty line, which is a little bit of a joke, the federal poverty line, right? So, I mean, if you're talking about somebody's lived experience, they might still be poor or in poverty as far as the lived experience is concerned, right? What you're doing, which is still an advance, right? So not to belittle it, is you're saying, hey, if I calculate all these poor people as getting this $3,000 benefit, it actually raises the total income to the household above the threshold of poverty, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that when you wake up tomorrow, you're not poor, not you personally, but the universal you, right? So often part of the problem and part of the sense of false promise here is that some of the rhetoric and the terminology means one set of things technically, like are you poor, are you not poor, right? Are you unemployed, are you employed? But it means something very different to the lived experience around American kitchen tables or around your cot in a shelter, because there is no kitchen table anymore.
Chaparral, is this enough? Is
Yeah.
how
Yeah,
do you like
that's
this
true.
plan?
Because heck, it's going to bring some relief.
Okay.
You know, I think it could have been stronger, but it keeps people from being evicted. You know, so I'm grateful for whatever the government gives us at this point, because we have been downtrodden for a long time. So I have been, you know, feeling this pain, but
the way I would describe it for New York perspective is this is bodega flowers at 11 p.m. on Valentine's Day. He didn't forget you, but, you know, it's not going in the scrapbook.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness.
Oh
Well,
my goodness.
I'm getting feedback.
I'm getting
Paul.
feedback about Paul.
Okay. So
Okay.
you know, let me find out from you.
Let me find out from you.
Paul, I'm getting feedback. I need to find. Okay. All right. Need to find out where that was coming from. Dwight McKee, are you still there?
I am.
You talked about relief and remedy. Why don't you shoot that past Dr. Wolf?
Oh, I was simply saying that this is a temporary package that deals with relief. But I think our issue has more to do with remedy, is that I think we have to have a reset in the economy, as Roosevelt had to set up a reset in the economy after the Depression, is because everything is set up now in such a way that just the momentum of the economy favors the rich. And they will get, at this rate, it's a black hole on the upside, and they absorb all of the resources and they don't even have to do anything. Just wake up every morning, and the gravity is all on their side, and it draws all of the resources to the top. I would be looking more for something like where you would tie wages into cash flow, like dividends tied into cash flow, because what happens in these situations, as you know better than anybody, is the minimum wage becomes the maximum wage. It's not just the minimum wage, it's also the maximum wage. And so if you work at McDonald's and they give you $15 an hour, they would probably end up making $15 an hour for the next 10 or 15 years, irregardless of how much money the corporation makes. Though the guys that own the dividends and the investors have no limit on the amount of money that they can earn, there is no top side for them, which is why 2% of the population controls 70, 80% of the wealth. So I think we really need to look at a reset and look at doing business differently, or a different kind of economy that is much more inclusive.
Dr. Wolf, is that where we are now? I mean, is this?
I mean, so absolutely not, right? Like, that's not what this bill, in fairness to this bill, I don't think the bill seeks to do that and fails. I don't think that was the North Star that the legislation was sailing for. But this isn't to impugn anyone. I'm sure there are plenty of people who hoped for that, who were involved, and there are no doubt a bunch of elected officials who worked to make things more like that. So I don't want to deny anyone their efforts or belittle hard-won gains. But yeah, remedy versus relief makes a lot of sense as an analogy. It's not one we always use in economics, but it makes sense. I mean, so the way we would describe this in the field of economics, which is probably less eloquent, but more what I've been trained to do, I guess, is to say there is the immediate, right? So think about stabilizing the patient, right? And then there's the recovery. This stabilizes the patient, without which, recovery is very hard to imagine, right? So it's necessary, but not sufficient, would be the way I would put it. And it probably puts us in a better position to debate and begin an effort to change the economy structurally, which I believe is maybe more what you mean by remedy versus recovery, but this is not a structural change in the economy.
Do we need?
Right? And it doesn't.
Yeah,
I don't believe it seeks to be.
That's the deficiency of the approach. You know, I totally agree with you that it's absolutely set up for stabilization, but there's no plan for recovery. I guess is my question. Once you get the patient stabilized, he's kind of on his own, and so whatever he had, chances are he's going to come back and get again.
Attorney Fancher?
Agreed, but I think.
No, yes.
Sorry, I mean, all I
no,
say is,
please go.
yeah. But activists like you, sir, have always and only ever been the people who push that. Legislators, when you're lucky, do the recovery, and you can drag them, kicking and screaming, toward the remedy. That's the social roles played by different groups in American history. It's from my amateur reading of it.
Oh, I mean, do we need a reset, Dr. Wolf?
Depends on what we want. If we want an inclusive economy, if we want political stability, if we want lower crime rates, if we want a chance to see what a meritocratic situation looks like, if we want to be globally competitive, if we want to be able to take the best young women and the best young men and give them the jobs, yeah, we do, because too many people are born without a chance and too few people are born with an 8th, 9th, and 10th chance. So yeah, if those are our goals, yes, we need a reset. If we're trying to preserve big donors and big concentrations of wealth, then we don't, right? That's a decision. There's not so much a right and a wrong answer. That's kind of about your values, your politics, how you imagine the future to be.
What does that reset look like? I mean, what does that remedy look like as opposed to the relief? Or what should it look like?
Are you asking me?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you need to have wage growth outperform profit growth. You need to have a little bit more aggressive redistributive wealth policies around taxes. I think you need to massively go back into the building a middle class business, right? So I think the things, it isn't magic, okay? So one big portion of our social debate is simply a falsehood. We know how to build a big inclusive middle class. We have done it sometimes and other people do it now, right? Whether we have the political will to do it and then the political ability to sustain it is a very real question. But if you make it difficult to cheat someone out of wages, if you make it easy to organize for people who work, if you make tax policies quite progressive, which means they tax at a higher rate as your income goes up, you will end up with a larger middle class. You may have some reduced economic efficiency, and you may have upset people, and you will have some unfairness, right? For sure. You'll have some unfairness, and you'll have some people who don't gain from it, right? But the number of people who gain from it will be much larger than the number of people who lose just because of the way wealth is presently distributed, right? My argument is also, I think we now have reached the point where we need to have a little bit more equality, or maybe a lot more, to preserve even a functioning democracy. Because if 5 people can fund a political party to do what they want, it is very hard to sustain the notion of a democracy. Because every primary starts with a secret primary among donors. And especially in the Citizens United world, it isn't so clear that we see whoever the wealthy have decided to bid on in an auction when we go to vote. That is kind of problematic from a democratic perspective, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mark Fancher, what say you, Dwight McKee?
Yeah, I'm not for growing the size of the middle class. I'm for eliminating classes. I'm not for more fairness. I'm for universal fairness. This country has extraordinary resources, and it makes absolutely no sense that what we have is a system which preserves the power and the wealth for a tiny, tiny fraction of the population and for big corporations, and which approaches government from the perspective of what little crumbs do we need to throw to the rest of the population in order to keep them pacified, in order to keep them from trying to overthrow us. And that just makes no sense. What we do need is a way of governing which looks at the population as a whole and says, what do they need? on an ongoing basis? What do we need to do in order to ensure that their basic needs are met in terms of education, in terms of healthcare, in terms of income and employment, and all of those things? And we don't have that. And because of it, we suffer. You know, tiny little Cuba, which has been the focus of, you know, isolation and an economic embargo by this country for decades, has nevertheless been able to satisfy the most basic needs of its population. And not only that, you know, during the Ebola crisis, they were not only able to satisfy the healthcare needs of their own population, they were able to make an impact probably larger than any other force on the planet in terms of fighting Ebola in Africa, sending doctors there. During the COVID-19 crisis, as isolated as they are, because of a responsible approach to governing and meeting the needs of the population, they've been able to manage it, and they've drawn praise from many medical professionals, many medical associations about the way in which they've approached this. And even though they've been isolated and not been allowed to share to the extent that they should in receiving vaccines, they're developing their own vaccines for COVID-19. Imagine what they could do if they were not the subject of an embargo. And you can see the possibilities for the alternative way of running an economy. And that's what scares capitalists the most. That's why they fight socialism with everything they've got, because they know if people were able to see its possibilities, to see the humanitarian nature of it, the morality of it, you know, the efficacy of it, then everybody would demand it. And we would not have what we have now, which is just throwing crumbs to the masses of the people when they should be receiving a full meal.
Dr. Wolf, we have 2 minutes left here. Where do we go from here?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that I disagree with that. I don't see that as on the legislative agenda right now. So I think there might be a different discussion, the broader vision of social justice and progress versus the sort of what's on the menu in Cafe America 2021. But look, I think bigger changes, more creative, out-of-the-box thinking are required. The one thing I think I disagree with is I think the 60s, 70s, 80s were kinder, gentler America, where people kind of framed the debate, elite opinion and expert opinion said, is it better to give people something to lose, right, so that they're a little bit more docile, controllable, if the whole thing is manageable, or not? I think that it's been so long since we had a meaningful popular uprising that wasn't sort of a creation of a far-right special interest, that people have forgotten that that's possible, both the people who would agitate for that social change and maybe the people who would most fear it, right?
1 minute.
The calculation has become, is it cheaper to give something to the general public and hope the government can administer some docility and manageability in them? Or is it cheaper to build more prisons and build more police and have a plan to leave or move to a compound somewhere with walls around it? And I think the mentality of a social democratic developed country has been on life support in the United States for a long time.
30.
It started to look like, to govern like, to have an economic distribution more like a sort of developing country with a high level of comfort with a savage, what I would call a bone-breaking level of economic inequality.
Everybody.
And
10.
if we want to go back to even the flawed America of the past, let alone have
5.
which makes sense, and return to the past is always quite literally a reactionary agenda, then we need to start putting a lot of bigger decisions back on the agenda, including fairness and inclusion. I don't know exactly where we'd end up, and that's probably beyond my pay grade. But yeah, that's probably long overdue.
Santita Jackson Show. Dr. Max Wolf with us every Thursday at 7:30. And thank you to Dwight McKee and attorney Mark Fancher and attorney C.K. Hoffler, Robert Patillo, and Dr. Debra Holden and Darius Brooks. I love you all. See you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. You guys are the best.
Thanks, all. I'm not trying to diminish anyone's radicalism here. I'm just trying to, I guess I have my own, little pet peeve issue, which is just, I have a feeling that sometimes whenever we make a tiny step forward, everybody reasonably gets upset that it's not a stride forward, and then we don't stand up all that well united to the people who are looking to move backward. But I get the idea that this is like a day late and a dollar short. In fact, the concern.
Sure.
Yeah. I don't think we should ever lower our expectations for justice. That we should, but at the same time, I understand that when we make incremental change, we should seize on it, but not be satisfied by it. We can fight for reform and incremental change, but always keeping our eye on the prize and shooting for what we have to have. And if it's not on the legislative agenda, then either we have to force it onto the agenda or we have to get rid of the legislative structure altogether. Just take over. But
fair enough.
One way or the other, justice has to be achieved.
The best
I agree
of the sort of
Well, hold on. I want you to respond, Max.
Yeah, the best indictment of the better era that I think some people, even like leading progressives, even sort of the Bernie Sanders crew, they fell in love with this. First of all, it was very non-inclusive, right? So it was this sort of image of the golden age, which was probably a golden age if you were like a white Christian heterosexual man. And if you start to look at what that means, that kind of means a significant minority of the population, right? So not a tiny number of people, but nowhere near even half, right? So that's very problematic. And then the other thing is the golden era, as conceived by sort of corporatist social democrats, produced this. I mean, that's the ultimate indictment. This is what it grew up to be. So clearly, I don't think going back is a good guidepost.
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree with you, Dr. Wolf, that it's not on the menu. But what was on the menu in 18th century France was cake. That was on the menu.
Yeah.
And you see what I got, Marie Antoinette. And at the rate they're going, if they keep playing with the menu, if they don't expand the menu, if they don't add bread to the menu, we're going to run into that same situation in America. I don't think people now are at a sustainable level where they in such a way that they won't move to storm the Bastille. That's my real belief.
Agree. Look, where I live in Brooklyn, I take a walk every day. It's my discount COVID era gym. And look, this city is seething, as are many others. I don't think New York is unique, but we're bigger than the other cities, right? And we're more packed together, I think, than most places. It's not really still a really car city, right? So you see it, right? And I wonder how much of some of these curfews and subway restrictions and other things are about fear about what's coming out of its houses and apartments after COVID, as much as it's about COVID.
Anybody have a response?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, just more generally, I'm really happy that the Republicans did not support this package because it really sharpened the contradiction for a lot of people. I saw a report last night on CNN where a reporter went into one of the most staunchly Trump-supporting communities in Kentucky and asked the people what their reactions were to it, and they were just dumbfounded by why the Republicans would not support this. And I think that the more people begin to see contradictions, the more that they are, drawing their own conclusions about what government could and should be doing, and they see that the government generally is not responsive to common sense kinds of needs of people and the common sense interests of people. The more I think that improves and enhances the likelihood that on a mass level we're going to see movements for more fundamental change.
Yeah, I think younger people have shown the way too. I think it's always exciting to me anyway, and I also teach at the university, right? So it may not be and I teach in a graduate program in international affairs, so I know it may not be a universal cross section of the public, but I think right now in America, if you're younger, you're more progressive and you're willing to ask more and bigger questions about how the society should be arranged. And while there's always a bit of truth to that, I think it's been a long time since it was so much that way in America. That is actually, I think, the most hopeful thing that I see out there.
Mark, did you just say yeah?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I did. I agree. I agree. I mean, I don't know if it's the most hopeful thing, but it's definitely very hopeful.
Well, it is. Well, I really think that the needle is going to be moved because the pain is out here. As I've shared more than once, socially, this is untenable. This is unsustainable, what we're living in. We are having carjackings, Max Wolf, all over the city of Chicago. I mean,
I'm not involved in the carjacking industry, just for the record. That's not my principal form of employ.
Look, let me tell you something. This man does not make sense. Dwight and Mark, Max will say things like this, and they just kill the room. But I mean, one of my best friends came to get me, and she said, you got to make sure you're downstairs because I don't idle in my car now. I said, oh, wow. She said, the carjackings are off the hook. Nor does she drive her Mercedes anymore. And she has, it's I guess one of these, it's like an SUV. And she's got a dog that's the size of a horse. And so she's looking for, she got something, and it's not a showy vehicle, but, the pain out here is so deep that you're not even trying to stop too long at a stoplight. And I'm not alone. I mean, I know I'm not alone. I mean, people are really, really, I mean, these numbers that they continue to put forth in the mainstream media are deceptive. More than 10 million people are unemployed out here, Max. People, I mean, I know we're collecting.
Or underemployed, or remember that a lot of what looks like gain, some of it's employment, which is great, but a lot of what looks like gain is people dropping out of the labor force. This is sort of what I mean about becoming a developing country, which is increasingly unfair because a lot of developing countries are doing better, but we're just starting to have what they call a huge gray sector in economics, right? So all these people, they're not per se criminals, but that's a mislabeling, but they don't exist anymore in the official economy, which means we don't count them ever. They float around from a sort of under the table, quasi-legal, barter, desperation economy, which is growing really, really fast and which went into hyperdrive in the COVID downturn, right? Because part of what happened with COVID that nobody wants to deal with, which I think should be front and center, is we had a catastrophic failure of almost every level of government, which basically left the American public unemployed, locked in their homes, waiting to die for a year. And that kind of loss of faith doesn't bounce back.
Say that again. We locked people away for a year.
Yeah, we basically told them, go inside, stay there, find a way to get a mask, find a way to get some soap, rub it all over yourself, don't go out much, buy what you need some money, go F yourself. And if you're not dead at the end of the year, let's talk again. And I feel like that kind of emergency help doesn't get forgotten. Right, so I know people compare it to the world wars, and I get why, death tolls and mass sort of impact and mobilization, but I don't think it's a good analogy, right? I think we just had our 19th century plague, right? And everything about the United States is becoming 19th century. The question is whether the wealthy in this country figure out that the 19th century was a period of endemic violence and social movements against them too. Right? And how that kind of figures into the balance. And then what the public does with all this information. Do they decide that it's, some Mexican guy's fault or a Chinese person or a Democrat or, somebody who's gay who wants to marry their life partner? Right? Do they decide that it's because the cops can't do their job because of Black Lives Matter? Or do they decide that it's, racism, structural inequity, an exploitative economy, a lack of social benefits, right? I'm not so clear where that comes out. But I think we saw the closest we came to trying to solve those problems with a sort of classic fascist response on the 6th of January. I'm not sure what side the dice lands on, right? But I do think it's going to be rolled by the exigencies of the situation, that dice.
Absolutely. 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 Well, that's why, I'm sorry, was that you, Mark?
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say I'm going to have to sign off, but,
Any closing thoughts?
No, the only thing I was going to say is that, the tragedy is, the horrible tragedy is that the wealthy, I do think, make those calculations about the likelihood of social unrest, and that's directed at them. But I think they also make a calculation about their own mortality. And they ask themselves the question, is this going to happen in my lifetime, which may be another 10 to 15 years, and maybe not so much. And so let me just stay on track here, because I really don't care what happens after I'm gone. And I think that the world, at least this country has been run that way by people with power thinking only about themselves and what they will experience in their lifetime rather than what they're going to leave behind.
Dwight McKee, you have a closing
I
thought?
agree.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I do. It is that we could be so much more. America really could be an opportunity that comes once in a millennium for a country, because it does have all of the basic stuff. People who majority believe in God, educational system that for the most part educates, a certain amount of people at a certain level, and altruism that is uncommon for this age. And if we had the will and had a more empathy for where the world is and what we could bring to the world, then I think it would be a tremendous opportunity for us to, to play out what Dr. King called a beloved community, and to be an extension of what Christ, demanded of us to love our neighbors as ourselves.
We have that opportunity, but boy, we continue to turn our backs upon it. Creating the beloved community? No, it's a bleeding community right now. Why don't you close us out, Max?
All right. Well, thank you. And thanks to your other guests. It was obviously a good chance for me to learn a lot of things, and I always appreciate that. I think I'd say what we need is to try to be a we, and everything else, I think, can flow from that. And I don't know what can flow without that. We have to try to be an us or a we. And I think we just failed a big test. And I mean we, which is if we can't come together facing a mysterious and invisible enemy that's taken more than 500,000 of our fellow Americans' lives, that is not a good sign. And I think the first order of business might be to become a little bit more collectively concerned with how the overall is doing, and to let that be a little bit of a policy guideline, and to do that under the sort of basic human flag of we can't leave hundreds of millions of people alone, terrified, without medical care, without knowledge of their future employability or their housing, through another pandemic. We can't do it again, and we can't do it while we lose 500,000 people and get so scared that we drink or drug or pretend it's not happening. Like, let's just have our never again moment and try to commit to at least some bare minimum social concern and some bare minimum social safety net, so we don't leave 300 million people to ponder the worst alone in the dark for a year again.
Wow.
Well, I appreciated your perspective, Max, and you too, Mark, always.
Well, you all.
Thank you, sir. Likewise.
You're all great, and I thank you so much for these perspectives. People loved you, and they thank you, Linear Bob. You said you've been in the broadcast industry since 1964. Wow. And you listen, and thank you, and he's out on the left coast, and people are mentioning Dr. Richard Wolff. I think I can tell you this is his son, so the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree.
I know the guy. Rumor has it he's been sleeping with my mom, but yeah, still like him.
Oh, yes, this guy, absolutely, and what a blessing, what a gift he is, what a gift he is, and I just wow, what a gift, and all of your gifts, Dwight McKee. Attorney Mark Fancher, attorneys C.K. Hoffler and Robert Patillo, Dr. Debra Furr Holden, Pastor Darius Brooks, all of you are such gifts, and I just thank you for the gifts that you are to all of our lives, and most particularly to mine. That's this show. I wouldn't be able to make it or do it without you. I'm so glad that you all give of yourselves and share with this audience, um, and they respond, and they respond. So, um, love you, everybody. Love you so much. Hey, Zed, how you doing? Mwah. Sending you much love, Blu-ray and Deborah and Daphne and everybody. Sending you all so much love. Nicole, love you, girl. I will see you, Adrian, Paul, Meddy, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. Sending you much love and many blessings. Have a safe day. Have a great day. God bless. And we'll talk about what President Biden has to say tonight, tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. God bless.